We're here with Mr. Malcolm Ryder. Malcolm, welcome.
Thank you.
Could you tell us a little bit about your art, your photography, what inspires you?
Sure, I'd be happy to. If I go back to the beginning, I'm an art student. I was trained as an artist. I grew up in a family of artists. And so I initially went into professional life as an artist. But I took a detour for a while into a completely different world of, high tech and management consulting. And now, many years later, I've decided to come back to being an artist full time. I live in Oakland now, although I'm not an Oakland native, in California, which is one of the largest states in America, and it takes up most of the west coast of continental United States. So there are an abundance of different types of natural resources. The politics here are very complicated because the state actually includes farmlands, mountains, deserts, everything you can imagine in one jurisdiction. And the leading cities, both politically in terms of their power and resources, and also in terms of their general attractiveness, are Los Angeles in the south of California, Sacramento in the north, and San Francisco in the mid part of California, which sits on a bay. And on the other side of the bay is its sort of sister city, Oakland. So that's where we are now. And Oakland has had a posture in relation to San Francisco of being kind of the younger sibling of San Francisco. Right now, it's 2025. There have been many global disturbances in urban life in America, and those global disturbances have actually leveled out the kinds of privileges and problems that are experienced by San Francisco and Oakland. So it's fair to argue that there's not that much difference between the two cities right now. They're connected by a famous bridge, and there is a lot of back and forth, population-wise and commerce-wise, between the two cities. I moved to Oakland. I'm not a native. And when I got to Oakland, I arrived as an artist, and I also arrived as a new resident starting a family. So my sensitivity to the quality of life in Oakland was extremely high. The reputation and the portrayal of Oakland, however, has been incredibly negative for many decades. So let me go back to talk about Oakland over several decades. Oakland became stable and somewhat prominent because it was a transportation terminus for both the aquatic shipping industries and for the railroads. So there was a lot of industrial energy that coalesced in Oakland. It created jobs, jobs created communities.
And that was at the end of the 1800s, right?
Right. So, but that also meant that Oakland was very dependent on the regularity and the policies of industrial employment. And industries changed, very fundamentally over the first half of the 20th century. Rail industry goes much less commercial as a passenger medium, and shipping was also fundamentally transformed by several things, ranging from finance to waterways and engineering and new technology in general. So Oakland went through a major change during which it lost a very significant number of jobs, which flattened out the economy and triggered some very long-term side effects as neighborhoods fell out of maintenance, started losing permanent residents, and basically, we're on a path of being abandoned in such a way that governments, the wealthy, and other powerful parties could come in and take over without any resistance. As a resident of Oakland, and particularly one who lived a different experience in Oakland than what had been promoted to me as an outsider before that, I wanted to create a very specific image, an alternative image of Oakland, which emphasized the positive things that are possible and real going on right now. But to get to that positivity now from the distress that Oakland has gone through it's a pretty big jump. After industrial changes, Oakland went through several things that characterize other major urban centers, including drug epidemics, crime waves, of course, COVID, and gentrification. So if you imagine
Can
Oakland as...
I ask you a bit? Can you go a little bit into the demographics of Oakland over
Sure.
the past, I guess, 2 or 3 centuries?
Sure.
What you know of it?
Oakland is on land that was already cultivated and fully inhabited by indigenous peoples. They and their culture weren't able to push back against the early stage industrialization. And the industrialization brought in a very large labor force, which was a mix of Latinx, Asian, African American, and others. So Oakland started out pretty mixed, pretty diverse, but each of those constituencies had a different experience and a different reaction to the industrial changes. Oakland became predominantly and almost exclusively an African American city for a stretch. And it still is, more than most other urban cities, mostly a Black residential city. But
do you know why that is? That Oakland became a predominantly African American city?
Yeah, one of the things, one particular example is that the African American diaspora from the South in America featured lots of Blacks moving to urban places that had industrial jobs. You didn't need a degree from an educational institution. The pay was actually quite good, and you weren't a slave anymore. So Oakland, like various other places, including Detroit and some other cities, were magnetic to Black people in America migrating from the South. Then, as another specific instance, the railroads, which were one of the major passenger opportunities in the country at the time, had luxury cars and things like that. So this job called the porter came into existence. Porters took care of all the passengers during their journeys. In Oakland, all of the porters were Black men. They were making good money for a while, so they were able to buy property, build homes, start communities, and maintain them. After a while, that first instance, really significant instance of a self-sustaining Black middle class community in America was thriving to the point where Oakland became known as the Harlem of the West. Around the world, Harlem is known as a cultural mecca, as well as a very interesting concentration of politically active African Americans.
So you're referring to Harlem in New York City.
That's
on
right.
The East Coast of
Right.
the United States.
So the Harlem of the West, though, was not sustainable against the this succession of other kind of very, almost universal disasters, like drug epidemics and COVID and so forth. Also, in America, the banking system is very complicated, but looking at it over a more historical span, it's systematically de-invested in minority communities. So, for example, housing, which had already belonged to African American families, started escalating in value because they were on property that was coveted by wealthier individuals or even corporations. And that triggered a wave of takeovers where blacks could not afford to keep out the wealthier and more powerful parties that were moving in. And some of those transactions became really disastrous, but they instantly eroded both the self-help capability of the communities and their cultural identity.